The Recurve V2 RDA from Wotofo. The Recurve V2 RDA was sent to me for review from Wotofo. This is a dual coil RDA made in collaboration with Mike Vapes. Although this is called the V2, this is actually the third iteration in this line because the original Recurve was a single coil RDA that came out in mid-2018. Then Wotofo released the dual coil Recurve a year later in mid-2019. Now this one is the updated version of the dual coil Recurve. So yeah, it does make sense to call it the V2. I just wanted to provide a little history. Anyway, let's talk about it. First, the specs. It's single and dual coil compatible. It's 24.6 millimeters in diameter, 35.5 millimeters tall. It's made of stainless steel. Comes in the colors of black, stainless steel, gunmetal, blue, gold, and rainbow. And you can get this for around $35 US. In the box, you'll get the Recurve V2 RDA, one 5mm inner diameter dual core fused Clapton coil, and one 5mm cotton strip to go with it, and two 3mm inner diameter framed staple Clapton coils, and two 3mm cotton strips to go with those. You also get two airflow adapters, a coiling rod, a screwdriver and Allen key, a squonk pin, and some other spare parts and accessories. So like I mentioned, the Recurve started with a single coil version. When the dual coil Recurve came out, the curve of the barrel was slightly removed and it became more straight. With this model, the curve is back. It's still not as curvy as the single coil version, but the curve is definitely back. I like that because I really like the looks of that curved barrel. The drip tip is an A10 Delrin drip tip, also with a curved design to match the RDA. The last version of the Recurve came with two tips, one of them being a nice low-profile resin tip, and the other a very curvy frosted tip. The V2 comes with only one tip, and now it's a solid black, low-profile version of the frosty tip that came with the last RDA. I don't really mind only getting one drip tip, but I do wish Wotofo would have included a nicer resin tip like both of the previous versions of the Recurve. Below the drip tip is the top cap. This is new to the Recurve line because the previous models didn't have a top cap at all. The barrel and the top sections on the old versions were a single piece, and I didn't care all too much for that because when you turn the barrel to adjust the airflow, the RDA will try to turn and sometimes it would come off the device unless you really lubed up those O-rings with e-liquid. So this is a welcome change in my opinion. Now you can turn the top cap to adjust the airflow. When you pull this out of the barrel, you see that it has cutouts for the adjustable airflow, a step-down system. The barrel has 6 airflow slots, 3 on both sides. The cutouts on the top cap line up with these slots so that you can adjust the airflow in a few different ways. You can close off either the top row or the top 2 rows, but you can't close the bottom row at all. I don't know why they didn't make that an option, but I wish they would have. The top cap is a little snug when trying to adjust the airflow, but it's not too difficult to turn. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's good. I really like the restriction on the O-rings on the deck. The barrel slides off really easily, yet the O-rings also keep the barrel in place nice and snug, or seems to me. I suppose that depends on how much e-liquid you get in there though, because if you get a lot of liquid on those O-rings, the top cap could slide off pretty easily. I like to keep mine really clean, so I don't have that problem. Compared to the previous dual Recurve, it can be adjusted to have way more airflow, but it can't be closed off to be as restricted. Close though, with one row closed off on the V2, it's about the same as having all holes open on the dual, and with 2 rows closed off, it's about the same as having one column closed on the dual. It was hard to close 2 columns on the dual because of the way it was designed, so it only got a little more restricted, which the V2 can't get to, but it's not far off. And it has about the same flavor as the dual Recurve when the airflow is wide open, but it has better flavor with 2 rows open, and even a little better with 1 row open. Now compared to the original single coil Recurve, the V2 has about the same amount of airflow with 1 row open as the single coil does with all rows open. The V2 doesn't close down enough to match the single coil version with any of the holes closed off. It also doesn't have as good of flavor as the original. So because of those things, I'd say that it doesn't replace the original, but that doesn't mean that it's still not a great single coil RDA. It works great in single coil mode. As for flavor as a whole, is it as good as a tank running a mesh coil? No, but the flavor overall is pretty good. Alright, now let's talk about those airflow adapters. The first thing to consider before building the deck is which airflow adapter you want to use. Now this is a really interesting idea. Wotofo has basically made this RDA capable of both single coil and dual coil modes simply by using these adapters. You get 2 adapters in the box, one for single coils and one for dual. The dual coil airflow adapter is pre-installed. These basically attach to the deck and sit above the coils, acting as a sort of chimney with honeycomb airflow holes built in. It's almost like a cap that's replicating those ramps that were on the old versions of the Recurve. I really like this idea because with a normal RDA, you have to hope that your coils are lined up in the right position to the airflow slots and that the airflow is hitting those coils in the right way to give you the best flavor. With this airflow cap, the incoming air has no choice but to be pulled into the cap and hit right on those coils. Positioning the coils might change things up a little, but for the most part, I'd say that you don't have to worry so much about coil positioning. Those adapters significantly reduce the size of the chamber, and it directs as much flavor as possible up the chimney. The only thing I don't like about these airflow adapters is the way they look. This RDA is nice and shiny, and these adapters look like ugly medical accessories. I would have liked for them to be nice, shiny metal. Maybe they considered that, and I don't know, these are safer for preventing a short or something. The single coil adapter won't fit over a dual coil build, but I did test this with a dual coil adapter over a single coil build, and it seems to work just as well as using the dual coil adapter. I also tried using the RDA without any adapters at all, and you'll get a ton of airflow, but hardly any flavor. So it will work, but you're not going to want to use it that way. So Wotofo recommends that you use a max size of either 2 3mm inner diameter coils or a max size of a single 5mm diameter coil. They've included both of those in the box so that you can test the RDA out in both configurations. This is a postless deck, so to install the coils, you need to unscrew the screws on the side of the deck and then drop those coils down. You'll need to pre-cut the legs on the coils first, which is one of the things that I never really liked about postless decks. Postless decks look cool and clean, but they're not easier to build. I have to admit though, this deck does look really good. Way better than a deck with posts. It's really sleek. You can cut these down anywhere from between, I don't know, around 6.5mm to 8mm with your coil measuring tool. And Wotofo didn't include a measuring tool, which is a bit of a bummer. I think all vape companies should include a coil cutting tool when they have postless deck RDAs, but if you don't have one, you're just going to have to play around with how short you cut those legs until you hit a good spot. There's also a squonk pin in the box, so if you want to use this on a squonker, you can easily swap that pin out. It's not so easy to use as a dripper, because the drip tip is so slim that I found myself taking the barrel off and dripping that way, but then you also have to drop the e-juice into the hole on the airflow adapter, unless you want to take that off too. So this is a little more cumbersome to use as a dripper and a little messier. Like the previous versions, it seems a lot more suited to squonking, but it still works fine as a dripper. So that's the Recurve V2. It's a great looking RDA that performs well and has good flavor. The airflow is nice and smooth, and I like that you can use this in both single and dual coil modes with those caps. They restrict the airflow specifically for each mode. I think the airflow caps are a little ugly, but that has nothing to do with performance. I also wish that you could close that last airflow row on the barrel, which would have been especially useful for single coil mode. One thing about those airflow caps too is that once you get liquid on them, they get really loose and they can pop off. So that's a bit of a drawback too. I really like the change from the previous versions of the RDA of splitting up the barrel into 2 sections and then adding that top cap for airflow adjustments. I would have liked for a nicer resin drip tip, and it would have been nice to include a coil cutting tool, but those aren't necessary to get a vape out of this. So this was sent to me for a review from Wotofo, and you can get one from them for around $35. Thanks for checking out this review, and I'll catch you in the next one.